Welcome, everyone, back to the Temple of Technology. We are live with tonight's virtual cantina featuring David Lynch Film Fest. With me in the cantina, which we will go to now, is my co-host and fellow traveler, McJulie. Hello, McJulie. How are you today?
Hello, I'm fine.
All right, yes.
For certain Lynchian values of fine.
For Lynchian values of fine. So, if you are living under a rock, you may not know that David Lynch passed away last week, 24 hours before Julie and I were going to talk about Eraserhead in this very stream. And that hit both of us kind of hard since we quite like David Lynch, but it hit the world hard because it's a singular vision. And I mentioned in the last stream that he is my favorite filmmaker with relatively limited corpus. He achieved a lot. And I have many thoughts about that and why that is the way it is that we'll get into later on in the stream. So, Julie, tell us about you, who you are, why you're famous, and then your relationship to David Lynch and David Lynch films.
Let's see. Well, my biggest claim to fame at this point is that I write a series about Cajun werewolves, Tales of the Rougarou, which is has published up through book 5. And my connection to David Lynch is really just that I've been a fan since I was in high school. My AP Lit class, we all watched Eraserhead for reasons which I cannot now remember. But I remember getting the impression that I was the only one who was really enjoying it, which is not an uncommon reaction when you're watching David Lynch. If you're a David Lynch fan, this and this fandom was kind of cemented a couple of years later when um, his uh, his version of Dune came out, and it was widely considered to not be good, and I disagreed very much with this opinion.
I
So,
also disagreed with that opinion. I thought that movie was fantastic.
yeah, and so basically, I just continued to be a David Lynch fan, and one of the things that was really fun for me was when Twin Peaks came out, and it felt like all of a sudden David Lynch fandom was almost mainstream. It felt like every single one of my hipster friends uh, was a David Lynch fan for a while. Anyway, um,
So
so
by that time,
so really,
oh, sorry, keep talking.
oh, I was just gonna say, so really, that's it. Although it is very sad for me because I would love for David Lynch to direct, to direct a movie version of one of my werewolf books. And
That
now
would be
that's never gonna
fantastic.
happen. So I'm very sad.
Yeah, there'd be all
I mean,
sorts
not
of
that it was
weirdness.
gonna happen anyway, but you know.
Yeah, there'd be all sorts of weirdness for that. Now, by the time Twin Peaks came out, David Lynch had made 4 feature films. He had made Eraserhead, which was originally a student project, and we'll talk about that tonight. He had made The Elephant Man, under the producing chops of Mel Brooks. He had made Dune, and he had made Wild at Heart, I believe.
Uh,
Was
Blue Velvet.
Blue Velvet? No, Blue Velvet was first. Yes, Blue Velvet, and we'll get to all those in the fullness of time. But Eraserhead was a crazy film. It was actually his student film that he had made that took 7 years to make. And they would go back and they would film a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here. And it was crazy, it was abstract, and the actors visibly aged throughout the process. They weren't able to secure distribution at first, but then they screened it a bunch of places, and then people were desperate to distribute it. And it actually went, what we would call today, into first-run syndication, where the distributor who ended up picking it up put it as a midnight movie all across America. And more people saw it that way than would ever have seen it in a wide theatrical distribution. But it was still weird. It was just odd. And Lynch himself described it as abstract. He was an artist, and he got into making movies because he wanted to see his pictures that he would paint. He wanted to see them move. And he found out that the way to do that was just to film them. And then figure out different ways to film his artist's vision. And when he talks about Eraserhead being abstract art, he really means it, because it means nothing, but it means everything at the same time. Your thoughts on that?
You know, that's interesting because I would say that Eraserhead doesn't mean nothing, largely because it's thematically very consistent. The fact that it's about anxieties around, childbirth, parenting, sex, relationships, it really doesn't stray very far from that. So yeah, I suppose you could call it abstract, but I don't know. David Lynch is a surrealist, and Eraserhead is one of his more purely surreal films. And I would probably call surrealism a little bit different from abstraction. It's like, I wouldn't necessarily, but films are a little different than, say, painting, because the number of pure surrealists making movies is extremely small. It may have just dropped to zero passing with David Lynch, honestly. So,
well, I say abstract because that was the exact word he used to describe it in an interview. And he had gone to the interviewer and said, look, it means what people think it means. He himself, indeed, surrealist. In fact, if you look at the wiki page for Eraserhead, like I've got up over here, surrealist is all over the place. It's just nonstop surrealist, surreal. And I would agree with that assessment. It is absolute madness for how it goes. But it is disconnected from reality, but at the same time, it is just on this side of the uncanny valley. You can recognize everything that's going on in this movie. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can recognize it. You can see what it is, and that's why I think it disturbs a lot of people, and why it really grabs you in that in the subcockles. You can't describe a lot of times what's going on, but you can look at it and go, "Ooh, that happened, or that happened, that happened." And I want to read the plot as it has been compiled by the internet, the Wikipedia plot. And then I want to discuss my impression of the film and your impression of the film. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, this was Lynch's student film. It was made as part of his residency at the American Film Institute. He got personal loans, and he lived in these stables on the institute, which were part of a larger mansion quality, and then they filmed in there. So the rooms that you see are sets they would build when they went to film. They would film, and then they would take the sets down because they would have to film something else during the day. So they filmed at night. Other people filmed during the day. So, here's the plot as summarized by Wikipedia. Henry Spencer's face appears superimposed over a planet in space. He opens his mouth and a spermatozoan-like creature emerges. A man inside the planet moves a set of levers, and the creature swims away. In an industrial cityscape, Henry walks home with his groceries. He is stopped outside his apartment by a beautiful girl across the hall, who informs him that his girlfriend, Mary, has invited him to dinner with her family. Henry leaves his groceries in his apartment, which is filled with piles of dirt and dead plants. That night, Henry visits Mary's home, conversing awkwardly with her mother. At the dinner table, he is asked to carve a chicken. The bird moves and writhes on the plate and gushes blood when cut. After dinner, Henry is cornered by Mary's mother, who tries to kiss him. She tells him that Mary has had his child and that the two must marry. Mary, however, is not sure if what she bore is a child. The couple move into Henry's one-room apartment and begin caring for the child, a swaddled bundle with an inhuman face that resembles the spermatozoan creature seen earlier. The infant refuses all food, crying incessantly and intolerably. The sound drives Mary hysterical, and she leaves Henry and the child. Henry attempts to care for the child, and he learns that it struggles to breathe and it's felt painful sores on its skin. Henry begins experiencing visions, again seeing the man and the planet, as well as the lady who inhabits his radiator and stomps more of the sperm creatures. After a sexual encounter with the girl across the hall, he has another vision in which the lady in the radiator sings, and his head pops off his body while he is fidgeting, replaced by the baby's crying head. Henry's disembodied head falls from the sky, landing on a street and breaking open. A boy finds it and takes it to a pencil factory to be turned into erasers. Awakened, Henry seeks out the girl across the hall but finds her with another man. Crushed, Henry returns to his room. He takes a pair of scissors and for the first time removes the child's swaddling clothes. It is revealed that the child has no skin. The bandages held its internal organs together and they spill out after the bandages are cut. The child gasps in pain and Henry stabs its organs with the scissors. The wounds gush a black liquid covering the child. Thick liquid covering the child. The power in the room overloads, causing the lights to flicker. As they flick on and off, the child grows to huge proportions. As the lights burn out completely, the child's head is replaced by the planet seen at the beginning. Henry appears amidst a billowing cloud of eraser shavings. The side of the planet bursts apart, and the man inside struggles with his levers, which emit sparks. Henry is embraced warmly by the lady in the radiator, as both white light and white noise crescendo before the screen turns black and silent. And that all happens in about 2 hours of not a lot of talking. There's
Very little dialogue.
There's a lot of reaction shots. There's a lot of close-ups on the main actor, John Nance. Was it David Nance? John Nance. It's the wrapped in plastic guy from Twin Peaks, if you don't know who I'm talking about.
I know.
No, I was talking to the internet. I know you know.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Because we're on the internet. Jack Nance.
Yes, Jack Nance. Yes,
So,
who will later come back to tell us she's dead, wrapped in plastic.
wrapped
the immortal
in
words.
Plastic.
Yeah, the relative lack of dialogue, I think, makes all of the dialogue in Eraserhead very memorable. Things like, which is funny because the description, it takes more words to say, Mary isn't sure it is a baby, than Mary saying, they're not sure it is a baby. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't really say that any of that was inaccurate.
Yeah.
That is what happens.
That is what happens. And that's why I kind of want to, for this film fest, we'll have watched the films recently, or many, many times over our lives. But this is an impersonal, homogeneous description of what these films are that has no impressions with it whatsoever. It's simply factual. These things happened on the screen. And Julie's point about dialogue is really interesting because there is famously no script for this movie. There are no storyboards. There are no shooting sides. There's simply what they did that night. And you'd say, okay, we're going to be doing this scene, and these are the things that are going to happen. And that's my horrible David Lynch impression. But
I
The
recognized it as a David Lynch impression, so it couldn't have been that horrible. I saw the other day I saw a clip of him directing a young boy acting in Twin Peaks: A Return. Um, and I don't know how typical that is of his directing style, but it was very much he just tells the boy, okay, you're gonna go here and you're gonna do this. And he tells him, a little bit how to feel about it, but it's very it's very practical in a way. It's like, go here, look under the car. It and I felt like that's how his that's how his films tend to go. Where it's kind of like um I feel like he doesn't tell the actors how to do it. He says, you walk over here, you say this, you know, you open this door, look at what's inside. And sometimes he might say, you look at what's inside, what you see is, and then he tells you what you see. But I think, he gets unusual performances from his actors, like not typical of what other actors, what other directors would get. And I think that his style is part of that, where um, he tends to be very pragmatic in terms of, you go here now, you do this now. So,
Yeah, and what I'm gonna move forward in our timeline. I saw him. I watch a lot of special features, and so I watched all the special features that were on the disc for Eraserhead, and in particular for the going to Twin Peaks: The Return. He There was a room where they had booked a motel, a scene where they had booked a motel, and late in the series, and they said, "Well, David, do you want to check out the room?" He says, "No, I don't need to check it out. I know what it looks like." I said, "But you haven't seen it." He says, "I've seen it here."
yep.
So no matter what the room looked like, he was going to film it as the room he had imagined. It's the room where Cooper and just forgot. Oh, stupid brain. Anyway, Colin McLaughlin and Laura Dern have sex in this room.
Yes.
And the subtitles for that scene say they make love mechanically, which is an apt description. But it's what he had thought was going to happen. He shot it. They shot the scene in a day. It's usually how filmmaking works, but this is David Lynch, of course, as Julie was saying. He says, "Go over there and look under the car. Pick up the head. Now look at me. Now look over there. Now look at me. Now look over there." And when we get to Dune in our series, which is a vastly different beast, right? It's a big budget film. It had to have a script. It had to have storyboards and directions. It had massive special effects, more than you can do with just moving the camera this way or that way. And compare it to the earlier works, especially Eraserhead, where it was 100% Lynch all the way through. And he had a DP, and he had people working on many different aspects of the film, but it was as his film, as the David Lynch film, as we now know it, a film by David Lynch. It was the thing he had the most control over everything he ever worked on. And I think it's why it took so long to get past, but also why it's just so there. It exists as this static thing where you could, like a red ball, right? When you see a red ball, you know that the ball is red. You know it's round. You're fairly sure what it's made of simply by comparing it to other balls. And so you don't have to touch it to know that it's probably going to bounce. But to be sure, you have to go up and touch the ball. You have to throw it at something. You have to drop it on the floor and hope that it bounces back up to your hand. And that's how Eraserhead is. We could talk about Eraserhead a lot, but unless you've watched it, you don't know what we're talking about. And you don't know the universe in which Eraserhead exists because you haven't been there. You haven't seen this film. And that Wikipedia summary is not enough to be that movie. So now I want to go to the spoiler section. The real spoiler section of our stream tonight is, what do you think it means? So what I think it means, what I think has gone on in this movie, is that it is the moments before death in which a man examines his life. So I think that, as mentioned in the Wikipedia summary, he has a girlfriend named Mary, and Mary has given birth to a child. I do not think Mary or the child survived that medical encounter. And I think that our protagonist blames himself for that and has died, either through grief or by suicide, but he is dead. And this is him moving on to the afterlife, making sense of his last moments. Because the beginning of the movie is the part of the film that is most rooted in fact. It has many different characters. They have dialogue, they talk, and they have interactions, and they do things together. And then slowly Henry becomes isolated. It's just him and Mary and the baby, and then it's just him and the baby, and then eventually it's just him, and his head literally blows up, and there's nothing but the baby. The baby consumes his life, and it is all he is this baby, which is another thing shown by him caring for the baby the entire time after Mary leaves him. But Mary leaves him because she did leave him. She wasn't a part of his life anymore, and she's never mentioned again. Like, somebody says, your wife, but they don't mention her name, and he doesn't talk about her name, and he doesn't say these things anymore. It's not a part of his life because she has left his life. He has died. She has died, and now he is dying, and he is moving on. And for me, why this works this way is because the woman in the radiator sings a song to him saying, there will be peace when you are in heaven. And that is the entire song, over and over again, her saying, there is peace when you are in heaven, there is peace when you are in heaven, there is peace when you are in heaven. And when she's done singing, she embraces him, and the two of them smile, and the lights come up. And then eventually, it gets completely surreal, and planets explode, and a guy with warts all over his face, which I think is also the child, because the child gets warts and sores on his face when they start to interact with it. Is just it takes over, and that's what I think the movie is. It's struggling with your existence and the lack thereof.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really legitimate way of looking at it. Um, I tend to back up a little bit. The first few David Lynch movies I saw, I think I misunderstood them at first because I didn't realize the extent to which David Lynch is always 100% sincere. Because the absurdist humor of most of his works make it seem as if, things are funny. A really good example of the absurdist humor that seems as if it's not sincere is in the first season of Twin Peaks when Leland jumps onto his daughter's casket and causes something to go wrong with the mechanism, and so the mechanism is just kind of going up and down and up and down in this very awkward way, and everyone's trying not to laugh because it would be wildly inappropriate to laugh, and yet it's clear everyone thinks it's ridiculous. And his works are full of those kinds of moments, those moments where you know, this is it's full of moments that are cringe, basically. I mean, let's be honest, people sharing their beautiful dreams about a million bluebirds, like Laura Dern in Blue Velvet, or Bobby's father in Twin Peaks, sharing this, wonderful dream that he's had about, how everything's going to work out all right. And it's easy to see those moments as, because they are absurd or because they're cringe, it's easy to see those as not sincere. But David Lynch is 100% sincere. So The Lady in the Radiator, which gives an interesting dimension to The Lady in the Radiator in Eraserhead, because the obvious explanation of Eraserhead, I mean, even though it does it in a very fantastical kind of surrealistic way, if you kind of strip away some of that aspect of it, it's really a very simple story. This kid is dating his girlfriend. There's a baby. Her parents force them to marry. They're raising a baby who is sick and deformed, which is something that does happen in real life. And won't stop crying. That's actually very, very common, for newborns to have colic or some other thing where they can't stop, they don't stop crying, the parents can't get any sleep. And I have it on good authority, although I have never experienced this personally, that being unable to sleep for a prolonged period of time because your child won't stop crying does make everything start to seem like a David Lynch movie. Um, and so, so his wife leaves him because she can't take the crying anymore. He's stuck trying to raise this baby. He doesn't know what he's doing. There's a point where, he suddenly realizes, oh, you are sick. And that's why you won't stop crying, but he still doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so, when he finally, undoes the swaddling clothes and basically exposes that, the baby has no skin to hold everything in, he basically kills the baby just by taking off the swaddling clothes. I mean, that's almost like a parental nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea that you do something that seems like a normal thing that you should be able to do, and it literally kills the baby. So, so he does this. Um, he his wife's left him, so he sleeps with the neighbor across the way, but then, she's not really that interested in him. She dates someone else. And he basically he goes into hallucinations, sort of gradually the uh as the action unfurls. But in a way, you could say, okay, you know, he kills the baby. Does he do it on purpose? And I've always felt like that was kind of I don't know, a moral question hanging over Eraserhead. That is this about him? Because it appears to be that he actually is trying to care for the baby as best as he can. But you can't deny that at the end, him taking off the swaddling clothes um becomes an act of violence, even though it doesn't look like it's intended as an act of violence. Um and so Lady in the Radiator in heaven, um is that showing you that he's forgiven? Um
Yeah, because
you
he
know
tried,
yeah.
or at least in this pseudo reality, he tried.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's easy to see it as a surreal, nightmarish exaggeration of what it feels like to try to be a parent when you're not ready. Um, and so that's how I've always seen it. Um, and that the central, I guess to me, the central tension is does he do anything wrong? And the reason that I think that an important question is because of the Lady in the Radiator and her heaven song. Because if she weren't singing about heaven, I wouldn't wonder, well, does he go to heaven?
Yeah.
You know. Um, but I think that David Lynch's movies or his works in general are infused with a really interesting kind of non-Christian heaven and hell imagery. That is there's really no Christianity or Jesus-y aspect of it, but his work very much has like heaven and hell. And of course that's made kind of literal in the Twin Peaks universe, where you get that White Lodge, Black Lodge stuff. But I think that it shows up throughout. And so in Eraserhead, there's obviously heaven, you know, with the lady in the radiator. Why why is heaven with this strange lady in the radiator who has mumps?
Yeah.
That's, you know, you can't get too literal when you're looking at a David Lynch work.
I would
Um,
agree.
but I do think that the fact that like everything fuzzes out to white at the end of it, that's kind of a visual vocabulary that he often uses to suggest redemption or, achieving heaven.
Yeah. Purity.
Yeah, purity. Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things that really struck me on this viewing, and I think this is my fifth viewing of Eraserhead, and I thought about watching it twice in the last week, but I was hoping that there would be a commentary track, but there wasn't one. In fact, a lot of these aren't going to have commentary tracks, but they're going to have documentaries associated with them. But early on in the film, this is the beginning of Act 2. So Act 1 is setup, Act 2 is descent, Act 3 is redemption in your 3-act structure. Lynch has like 9 acts in his movies. But in this movie, Mary has moved in, they have gotten married, they don't show us the marriage, they don't show you... there's a scene where the baby is handed to Henry at the hospital, and that scene was cut out, that whole part was cut out. But he goes down to check the mail, and he gets a package that is this big. And inside that package, it looks like it's a seed, but it could also be a maggot, or it could be a toadstool. It's a thing. And he gets this object, he opens it up, he looks at what it is, and then he puts it in the closet and he shuts the door. And they show you this cabinet, rather. They show you this cabinet for most of the movie. And it is not opened. It's not there. He's not going to think about what's in there. That's why one of the things that really drives home to me is like he is already dead. And that is the knowledge of what he's done. Or that is the knowledge of what happened is here. Take this, I'm going to put it away, and I'm going to try to make this right. I didn't do this right when I was alive. I'm going to do it right now. I didn't do it right now. And do it right now. And I was thinking, man, is he going to feed that to the baby? Is this the thing the baby actually needs? Is this crazy little thing? I don't know. What's going on there? What's in the cabinet? Because there's nothing in the cabinet. And, there are things missing all around Henry's apartment. For example, there's a plant stuck in a big mound of dirt that's on his bedside table. There should be a pot there, but there isn't a pot. Something is missing. There are holes in his blanket. There are holes in the floor. There's holes in the walls. The electricity goes off and on all the time. There are things that aren't right about his life that he is ignoring completely because he is focusing on caring for this baby. And the only way he knows how is just, little eyedroppers, try to feed it, try to do whatever. But when we get to that point, as Julia's mentioned, where he takes scissors and he cuts open the swaddling clothes, it's it calls back to the dinner scene he had with Mary's parents, where it said that Wikipedia said he carves a chicken, but he doesn't. They have chickens that are this tall, this big, and they're like 5 or 6 tiny little chickens that are probably pigeons. But the father was
Or
calling
Cornish
them
game hens.
Cornish game hens, yeah, but they were even smaller than Cornish game hens would normally be, I thought. But when he carves into it, and it oozes out the blood, and it spasm all the way, or that is reflexive. That is echoed in the baby's death throes. Right down to he carves into the baby to try to end its suffering, and that black ooze pops out. So when he finally gives up, and he finally lets go of the things that were holding him to Earth, then things get really weird. You know, the baby explodes and becomes a planet, which then explodes, and then everyone goes to heaven, maybe. Or they just burn over and over again. I mean, we've been watching this film for 50 years now. And every time we spin that sucker up, Henry's right back to the beginning where he's looking around and he walks into darkness. He walks from light into darkness to get to the place where he lives, and that's the last time he is ever in daylight. Other characters are in daylight, but the last time Henry's in daylight is when he walks in the darkness, which is the opening shot of the movie. It's crazy how much of this just takes place at night, because they filmed at night, but that was intentional. You know, they had to black out that set to do that, because they would film all night and the sun would come up, and they would have to hide shadows, and it would have more. They had to have complete control of the lighting in the room. You know, there's a scene where Henry and the attractive woman across the hall, who doesn't actually have a name in the movie, she's the attractive woman across the hall. They are making love in Henry's bed, which then turns into a jacuzzi filled with milk. And then slowly sink down into the milk while kissing and embracing. And then, yeah. We're moving on to the next scene now. Wait, no, what happened? Well, what happened was he was done filming that and he started to film something else. But for the context of the movie, it's another disjointed episode that he is trying to resolve. Because I don't think that woman ever existed. She's an idealized version of Mary. Except, as opposed to the actual version of Mary, who is very real and very true. Like the mother, Mary's mother and father, and Mary are the most real people in this movie. Henry himself is a surreal, unreliable protagonist, because he's not real. He doesn't do things that real people would do. In fact, the thing that's thrown at him all the time is, "I'm on vacation. You're on vacation. You can do this." Which is them saying, you're not doing anything, you're dead. Or you have no responsibilities in life. Take care of this baby.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting I think that your idea that he is already dead the whole time is an interesting one. But I always kind of read the death imagery, which is definitely there. I've always read it as being about the way parenting often feels like the death of who you were before, and the death of yourself as a self, where all of a sudden your identity is subsumed into the identity of this child.
Yeah.
And so that's actually how I've always interpreted the death imagery, is that it's more about the way, committing fully to being a parent can feel like death. It can feel like the death of the self. And it's interesting because I am inclined to interpret the woman he sleeps with as 100% real.
Huh.
he
awesome.
He folds around.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can really blame him, given that Mary runs out. But
yeah. Well, she's an
I've always
attractive woman
just
across
seen
the hall. She's clearly into him for no apparent reason. So yeah, he's gonna do it.
Exactly.
Look at his hair. Come on.
His hair is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
There's never been hair quite like that in all of cinematic history, really.
No, in the documentary I watched, actually several documentaries, they talk about Nance and what he brought to the performance, and he was normally in daylight he's the slicked back kind of guy and everything. He says, "All right, well, we're gonna have to mess up your hair a little bit. You have to do something." He goes, "I got a thing," and he went, and his hair just went up. He says it does this, and it was so intense, right? I mean, you think that the title is about his hair when you just see the poster and you've never seen the movie, rather than the real
That's
that
what I
his
thought.
head was actually made into erasers later on. But his just boom, and you think, oh my, what is this going on? How is this happening? I mean, the trailer tells you nothing about the film, which is awesome. It's so awesome, and it's kind of a shibboleth that we're talking about it now, and revealing our thoughts on the sequence and stuff that's going on, because it's like the shiny red ball. You have to go touch it, where you don't know what it is. It could be a planet that's about to explode. There's a guy in the middle of it, pulling on levers.
So is the guy pulling the levers God?
I don't know. I don't know at all. And the reason I don't know is because I've seen Twin Peaks: The Return, where there's a surreal planet in the middle of nowhere with one room in it and horribly deformed people, and the lights are all flickery and nasty, and Dale Cooper has to go somewhere and pull a bunch of levers to escape. Right? And so that imagery means something to David Lynch, and he means a lot to it. I don't think the guy with the levers is God, because he blows up.
He might be the devil.
He could be the devil. He could be torturing Henry to see if he will recant. Or, will you give up? Will you give up? Will you do something different this time if I give you an out? He could have left that room at any time. He could have left the baby to die, gone off with the woman, and the two of them could have had a life. But he didn't. He sat there taking care of that baby. And as you mentioned, right, then when the baby cries, you don't know what to do. I remember when my baby was sick, and he wouldn't stop crying, and he wouldn't stop crying, and it was, oh my God, what do I do? I tried putting him on the washing machine. I tried taking him for a drive. I tried holding him. I tried cooing to him. I tried everything to get my baby to sleep or to not be in pain. I couldn't do it. My mother tells a story about how I had an ear infection so bad she almost gave me up for adoption. I wouldn't stop screaming for a month.
Wow.
And she could not take it. My father was working. She was home alone with me. I wouldn't stop crying, and it was just, ah. She
Very
didn't do it.
Lynchian.
She considered, it's like, I can't deal with this baby, right? But yeah, Henry's whole life is subsumed by the care of this baby. He loses his wife. He can't go back to work. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. Everything he does is this horribly deformed thing, which was brilliant special effect, because it's it's a Muppet. It's a guy with his hand up through the table, moving a puppet around like this every so often, and the eyes move. And because it is so surreal, and it is not a human fetus in a zygote, looks like a human pretty early on. This baby never looked like a human at all.
Although it looks a little bit like E.T.
Yeah, it looks like an alien. It looks like something from another reality. But
Yeah,
he's told it's his baby. The baby is handed to him. Mary certainly believes it's her baby. Or, Shadow Mary. And they care. And the attractive woman from across the hall looks at the baby several times, but then looks away and looks back to, what she's doing with Henry in the bed. So I don't know. I don't know if the guy with the levers is God, if he's the devil, if he's Henry himself, if he's the
something
baby.
something we haven't discussed is before Mary leaves, there is a scene where they're sleeping, And every time
Oh
she
yeah.
rolls over in bed, it's like she, I don't know, emits another like kind of nascent, spermy thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I like
which
that scene a lot. Uh, it's actually it's not my favorite scene in the movie, but it's one because it's all Henry's reaction, right? Mary is scenery in there, and his dialogue to her is scoot over. Scoot over. You're crowding me off the bed. You're taking up my entire life. She takes all the blankets away, and then he tries to talk to her, and then boom, there's this thing. The same thing that popped out of his mouth to open the movie is the same sort of thing that woman in the radiator is stomping as she does her tap dance performance. And he gets one of these things and he has to yank on it, but she's given birth to more crazy nastiness, which could represent a miscarriage. It could represent a lot of things. It's hard to say, but it's like 4 or 5 of them. And he throws them against the wall and they splatter. And when this happens, the thing that he put in the cabinet pops out and runs around and squirms all
there's a
over the
little,
walls. And
yeah, and there's a point where it does a tap dance, right?
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But it escapes and it goes into the walls. And so whatever Henry had planned for it doesn't happen because he ignored it. He left it in the cabinet. And then, the next day, all that stuff is gone and pretty much so is Mary. We talked about the directing style of David Lynch. There's a scene where Mary is actually leaving, and she leaves the room. It comes back in without a word, and Henry goes, "What's going on?" Because she has forgotten her suitcase. But we don't know that's what's happening. She just grabs the end of the bed and starts pulling on it and yanking it, yanking it, yanking it, yanking it. This goes on for 4 or 5 minutes until she just finally pulls her suitcase out and goes. And that was actually a stage direction from Lynch, who said, "Yeah, just get in there and rep it out. No matter what you do, just put maximum effort into getting that suitcase and leaving."
Yeah, and actually that's another, I don't know, lynching characteristic, I guess, is somebody doing something that seems like it shouldn't necessarily be a major gesture. Like any other director, it would just be like somebody would grab a suitcase, right?
Yeah.
Um, David Lynch will have something where it goes on and on and on, and there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of effort. And, it becomes a big moment when it's actually typically a very small moment. Um, and, that's one of the things that makes it feel like a Lynch movie is that something takes a really long time. And I think forces us to pay attention, I guess, in a way, is um we get so used to film vocabulary, a certain amount of things just become background noise. Like one of my jokes about film is that when somebody goes to the grocery store and they come back home, they're always carrying a paper bag that contains a baguette and a bunch of celery that sticks up out of the front top of the bag. And this is, movie vocabulary for somebody has been to the store for groceries. And once I started to notice it, it started to drive me crazy how I would see it in movies where that was absolutely not in any way anything that character would have bought at the store where they went to. Like they'll go to some bodega where they absolutely do not have baguettes there or fresh bunches of celery. But that's still what they're carrying when they come home because that tells you that they've been to the grocery store. That's just so film is full of these kind of little things where, most of the time we don't notice them, or at least we're not supposed to notice them. And David Lynch, a lot of the time, will take something like that, like, Mary's grabbing her suitcase, um, and makes pay attention to it by, making it take a really long time or take a lot of effort or just be weird compared to what it would look like in any other movie. Um, and that's one of the things I like. Excuse me. One of the things I like about his work is that aspect is that, there's a certain place where a typical director puts a camera, what they want to make you look at. And he's making you look at something completely different.
Yeah, I agree. He doesn't use the rule of thirds, although he talks about it. He talked about it in his last film performance, which was in The Fablemans.
That's right. The horizon.
The Horizon. So Horizon's at the top, it's interesting. It's at the bottom, it's interesting. In the middle, it's garbage. Actually, he said a different word. But I'm going to go with garbage. I haven't sworn yet on this stream. It's pretty good.
Ah, interesting.
Well, I'll probably fucking swear anytime now.
All right. One thing we have not talked about yet is what I think might be one of the most significant Lynchian characteristics, and much in evidence in Eraserhead, is his use of sound.
Yes.
Because the fact that there's very little dialogue in Eraserhead does not mean that there's very little sound in Eraserhead.
It's a non-stop oral assault, in fact, from the beginning to the end. There's always something going on that you have to pay attention to, and you're trying to figure out where it's coming from or where. There's a hum, there's a pop, there's a scream, that the music comes up, and there's a lady tap dancing in the radiator. There's something going on, and you have to go look for it on the screen.
Yeah, Eraserhead in particular is full of uncomfortable squelching noises, unpleasant wet noises, and of course his I think of almost as his signature, like the electronic humming. Yeah. And machinery. Machinery is there's something industrial about a lot of his work. So you get these kind of mechanical noises, and a lot of them very harsh, like metal scraping against metal.
I agree. There's an extended sequence of Henry riding in an elevator, which is very, very. It's at the beginning of the movie, but the elevator is not working properly, and he wants it to go up, and he could just take the stairs, but he's stuck in the elevator. So we don't know why. I think that the stairs don't exist, but he could be doing that. And he gets in the elevator anyway because that's what he does. He comes home from work, he gets in the elevator, goes up to his apartment, and he goes and does things. But the sound in that elevator, as Julie says, is just crazy. Grinding gears. Like, if you got into that elevator, you would want to get out of that elevator. I'm not sure I would let the doors close.
Yeah. I've been in elevators a little bit like that in historic buildings, and every time I realized that it was going to sound like that, I've been, nervous and got out as quickly as possible. It's pretty rare to encounter a noisy elevator like that. Really, historic properties is the only place. So I don't know how long we were going to talk about Eraserhead.
I think we're just about good.
Okay.
I want to get our thoughts about what the movie meant to us personally and what we think it means. It's just two of us, right? And the movie's only 89 minutes long, and we've been talking for about 50 minutes. So there's not a lot more to talk about here. Uh, but something I wanted to do is I wanted to, and I think we've been peppering this throughout our discussion, is note the Eraserhead bits that move forward into other films. And so, Jack Nance, obviously. The use of sound, the use of lighting, and the surrealism, I think, are all Lynchian themes and tent posts that we'll see a lot more as we go through the filmography. The next movie up is The Elephant Man, and it's a hard movie to watch. It really is. I've only seen The Elephant Man once, and I saw it a long time ago. I saw it in the 80s. So it's going to be very interesting to watch The Elephant Man again, but it's a fictionalized biopic about a real person. And Mel Brooks was the producer, and having seen the short films of David Lynch and Eraserhead in particular, Mel Brooks said, "You're the guy. I want you to direct this film." And David Lynch said, "I don't think I want to direct that film." And Mel Brooks said, "No, you're the guy." And so what we've seen here in this first movie is going to build and build and build and build until we get to his last movie, which is Inland Empire. And that's nearly 2 decades later that movie comes out. Nearly 3 decades. 2 decades. 77 to 98. And that's a long career to make 6 movies. But there's 6 really good movies. So, that's it. Do you have predictions about what we'll see in The Elephant Man that we saw here in Eraserhead? Because it's such a different movie.
Let's see. It's been a long time since I watched The Elephant Man myself. Um, Although I do have to say, another reason David Lynch was probably on my radar when I was in high school is because I was a big David Bowie fan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, but back in the 80s, there was a point where David Bowie was on off Broadway, Broadway, I'm not even sure, but he was in a stage play of The Elephant Man, where he played the Elephant Man using mime. Like, he was getting rave reviews for this. And I saw clips from it. And so when I saw coverage of the David Lynch Elephant Man, I think I was hoping it meant that it was going to be a film of David Bowie's stage performance. It was not. Um, so that's probably another thing that put David Lynch on my radar, actually, was the through line of David Bowie and the Elephant Man. So predictions. I already know that it's in black and white,
Yeah.
which the Elephant Man, or sorry, the Eraserhead was in black and white. I already know it's in black and white. Um, and I would say predictions of things that will move forward is uh, the use of harsh lighting. That is lighting that is stark, where as opposed to being kind of soft lighting that shows you everything, you get light that throws some parts are overexposed and other parts are thrown into shadow. So I would guess we're going to get that lighting, and I would guess that we are going to get the intense sound design, where you get very you're very aware of environmental sounds, a lot of industrial sounds, uh, sort of contrasting with, very wet organic sounds. I would guess we're gonna get that. And I would also guess that we get, because almost every David Lynch movie has this, I would guess that we would get a lot of stretches with no dialogue. Fairly long stretches with no dialogue.
Right. Where you're forced to pay attention. Otherwise, you don't know what's going on. I agree with all those points. I think it's going to be, having seen so much more David Lynch now than I had when I originally saw The Elephant Man, because I saw it before I saw Dune, or Eraserhead for that matter. I saw it as a very young teenager, and it was weird, but I was watching for John Hurt and not David Lynch, because I'd seen John Hurt in many things, and to see what they did and how they did it. And for a lot of years, I conflated the movie Mask with the movie The Elephant Man, because they both deal with characters
interesting.
with deformed faces and deformed craniotomy. So separating those things out definitively is going to be very interesting for me, and I'm really looking forward to it, combined with all my knowledge of having seen all the David Lynch films. So that's my prediction. This is going to be revelatory, and I think I will have more to say about the production of that film. Eraserhead is not just a strange cult film. It has actually been selected as part of the Criterion Collection. So that is a film company which says these are the best films of all time. It was selected for the National Film Registry in 2004 as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. It is one of the best midnight movies ever. There's a whole bunch out there like Fifth Element, Rocky Horror Picture Show, but Eraserhead is one of those things where you will go somewhere and watch it simply so you could see 35mm print, right? As big as houses. I didn't watch it on my television. I pulled down my projection screen and projected it at 120 inches to watch Eraserhead. And I'm going to do the same thing with all of the films that we watch as part of the Film Fest, simply because I want that cinema experience again. I want to see what I saw when I did this, because I've only ever seen Elephant Man in home video. And the same thing, but not Eraserhead. I've seen Eraserhead on big screens. And Dune, very much so. So, all right. Julie, I want to thank you for coming on and being my co-host for this film fest.
You're welcome. Always happy to talk about David Lynch.
Exactly. And so we don't have a set timetable for our next film when we're going to watch it, but I think it'll probably be within the next 2 weeks. I don't want to promise it's next week, but I think we can watch within the next 2 weeks and then reconvene. And that is my goal. Thank you to all the people who didn't watch us. I'm hoping that you will come and watch us again as we move on into films that you are more familiar with. We are not doing this to make money. We do not monetize this stream. In fact, it's almost impossible to do so, given the nature of what we're doing. But we love David Lynch, and we can't tell him that anymore, except by doing this. So,
in heaven, David Lynch knows.
In heaven. All right. Thank you very much. Our stream is ending. I'm the idiot with a microphone.
I'm McJulie.
McJulie, and we will see you at the home movies. All right. Bye for now.